The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was a group of 417 alien species who had come together to rule the galaxy. They made laws. They kept peace. They decided which new species could join them and which ones would be kept out. That great meeting hall sat on a planet called Nexus Prime. The hall was so big that it could fit a small city inside. Thousands of alien leaders sat in floating seats that rose up toward a ceiling made of pure light. This was where the most important decisions in the galaxy were made. On this day, the council was talking about a new species. A strange species from a small blue planet on the edge of the galaxy. They called themselves humans. Ambassador Kethvorn of the Silthani stood at the center of the hall. He was a tall creature with gray skin and glowing lines that ran across his body. When he was worried, these lines would pulse faster. Right now, they were pulsing very fast. "I bring news about the humans," Kethvorn said. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. "Our observers have been watching them for 300 years. In that time, they have gone from simple machines to ships that can travel between stars." A murmur went through the crowd. 300 years was nothing. Most species took thousands of years to reach the stars. "This is very fast," said a creature from the back of the hall. It had 6 arms and eyes that covered its entire head. "Too fast." "Yes," Kethvorn agreed. The humans learn quickly. They adapt. They change. They never stop pushing forward. Another ambassador spoke up. This one was from a species that looked like floating clouds of gas. "Are they dangerous?" Kethvorn's glowing lines pulsed even faster. "I believe they could be. Not because of what they are now, but because of what they might become. If we do nothing, they could grow stronger than any of us." The debate began. It would go on for years. This was how the council worked. They talked. They formed committees. They studied and discussed and argued. They were very good at talking. They were not very good at acting quickly. While the council talked, the humans kept growing. On Earth, in a small office building in New York City, a man named Danny Holt sat at his desk. He worked for the United Nations Space Command, a group that handled all of humanity's activities in space. His job was to study signals from deep space. Danny was 42 years old with gray hair starting to show at his temples. He had kind eyes and a habit of staying late at work. His wife had left him 3 years ago because he spent too much time at this desk. Now he had even more reason to stay. He had found something that changed everything. 6 months ago, Danny had noticed strange patterns in the signals coming from space. At first, he thought they were natural. Stars and planets made all kinds of radio noise. But these patterns were too regular, too organized. Someone was watching Earth. Danny spent weeks checking his work. He ran every test he could think of. The answer was always the same. There were alien ships hidden at the edge of the solar system. They were sending reports about humanity to someone far away. Humans were being watched like animals in a cage. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what Danny found when he dug deeper into the signals. The aliens were not just watching. They were interfering. 3 years ago, a scientist in Germany had been close to discovering a new type of energy. It would have changed everything. But strange things kept happening to her experiments. Equipment failed. Data was lost. The scientist eventually gave up. Danny found proof that the aliens had caused those problems. They had reached down from space and stopped humanity from making a breakthrough. There were other cases too. A researcher in Japan working on advanced computers. A team in Brazil studying new ways to travel through space. Again and again, when humans got close to important discoveries, something would go wrong. The aliens did not want humanity to grow too strong. Danny sat in his dark office, reading the evidence on his screen. His hands were shaking. He knew he should tell someone. His bosses. The government. The whole world. But something stopped him. If he told everyone, there would be panic. People would be afraid. Governments would react in ways that might make things worse. And the aliens would know that humanity had discovered their secret. Danny needed to be smart about this. He needed to find people he could trust. He started making copies of everything. He saved the files in hidden places. He wrote down everything he knew in a notebook that he kept in a safe ad. Then, he started reaching out to others. Quietly, carefully. The first person he contacted was Dr. Lisa Park. She worked at a research center in Europe and studied quantum physics. Danny had met her at a conference years ago. She was brilliant and careful and did not trust easily. Perfect. Lisa was sitting in her lab in Switzerland when Danny's message arrived. It was coded in a way that only she would understand. Old friends had old secrets. She read the message 3 times. Then she leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Lisa had suspected something like this for years. Experiments that should have worked but did not. Discoveries that seemed close but never quite happened. She had always wondered if there was a pattern. Now she knew there was. She sent a message back to Danny. Just 3 words. I am in. Over the next year, they found others. Scientists who had seen strange things. Military officers who had noticed unexplained events. Business leaders who had felt invisible hands pushing against their plans. They called themselves the Quiet Circle. They never met in person. They never used their real names online. They shared information through methods so old and simple that no advanced alien technology would think to look for them. Paper notes passed by hand. Code words hidden in normal conversations. Messages written in books and left in libraries. Slowly, the picture became clear. The aliens saw humanity as a threat. Not now, but someday. So they were keeping humanity weak, holding them back, making sure they never grew strong enough to challenge the great powers of the galaxy. The Quiet Circle understood what this meant. Humanity had 2 choices. They could stay on Earth and be controlled forever, or they could find a way to escape. Danny's daughter, Katie, was 10 years old when he made his choice. He watched her playing in their backyard one summer evening. She was chasing fireflies, laughing as they blinked in the growing darkness. He thought about the future the aliens had planned for her. A future with invisible walls. A future where humans could never be more than they were right now. That was not the future his daughter deserved. Danny walked back inside and sent a message to the Quiet Circle. It was time to stop just watching. It was time to start playing. Humanity was going to escape, and the aliens would never see it coming. 20 years had passed since Danny Holt first discovered the truth. The world had changed in many ways, but in other ways it had stayed exactly the same. The aliens still watched from the edge of the solar system. The council still debated what to do about humanity. And humans still went about their lives, never knowing that invisible chains held them in place. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. The Quiet Circle had grown. What started as a handful of worried scientists was now a network that spread across the entire planet. Thousands of people knew the truth. Thousands more worked on the great plan without even knowing why. They called it Project Exodus. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in tunnels that no satellite could see, Admiral Grace Sullivan stood in a command center that should not exist. She was 61 years old, with short white hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had given her entire life to this project. The room around her was filled with screens and controls. Officers moved between stations, checking numbers and sending orders to places scattered across the solar system. "Give me the status report," Grace said. Commander Pete Walsh stepped forward. He was a young man with a serious face. On paper, he was nothing special. A middle-level officer with a boring job. In reality, he was one of the most important people in human history. "The Exodus fleet is ready," Pete said. 342 ships. Each one is 5 kilometers long. They carry everything we need to start over. Grace nodded slowly. "The colonists? 17 million people in cold sleep. We have doctors, engineers, scientists, farmers, teachers. We have genetic samples from every plant and animal on Earth. We have libraries containing all of human knowledge. And no one suspects?" Pete almost smiled. "The aliens are watching the show. They see what we want them to see. As far as they know, humanity is still stuck in the solar system, still struggling with the same problems, still decades away from anything important. This was the great trick. For 20 years, humanity had been building 2 civilizations at once. One civilization was real. It existed on Earth and Mars and the asteroid belt. It was the civilization the aliens watched. This civilization made slow progress. It had problems and setbacks. It was exactly what the aliens expected to see. The other civilization was hidden. It existed in secret bases on the dark side of the moon, in facilities buried deep inside asteroids, in ships that never showed up on any scanner. This hidden civilization had made discoveries that would shock the galaxy. Faster than light travel, energy systems that seemed impossible, weapons that could crack planets in half. 7 years ago, a ship called the Pioneer had traveled to another star and back. The trip took 3 days. No one in the galaxy knew it had happened. Grace walked to a window that looked out over the main hangar. Row after row of massive ships sat waiting in the darkness. Each one was a city in itself. Each one could carry 50,000 people across distances that most species could not even imagine. "Where are we going?" she asked quietly. It was a question she had asked many times before. The answer always gave her hope. Pete pointed to a star map on the wall. It showed the Milky Way galaxy, and then it zoomed out to show the space around it. Empty space. Millions of light years of nothing. And then, far beyond that emptiness, another galaxy. A spiral of light almost as big as the one they lived in. "Andromeda is too close," Pete said. "The Council might be able to reach it someday. So we are going further." His finger traced a path across the map. Past Andromeda. Past other small galaxies. Into a region of space so far away that light itself would take 60 million years to make the journey. There is a galaxy out there that the Council has never seen. No one in this part of the universe has ever been there. No one will follow us. No one will even know we exist. Grace stared at the tiny dot on the map. Such a small thing. Such a long way from home. Will we make it? She asked. "The ships are ready. The drives are tested. The math says we can do it." Pete paused. "But no one has ever tried anything like this before." "There are no guarantees. There never are." On Earth, the world continued as normal. People went to work. Children went to school. Governments argued about small things while the biggest decision in human history happened without them. Maria Santos was the Secretary General of the United Nations. She was one of only 200 people who knew the full truth about Project Exodus. The weight of that knowledge had turned her hair gray and given her sleepless nights. Today was the day. After 20 years of preparation, the fleet was ready to leave. Maria sat in her office in Geneva, looking at a simple form on her desk. It was the final authorization. One signature, and 17 million people would leave. Earth forever. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen. She thought about everyone who would be left behind. 7 billion people who would never know what happened. They would live their lives under alien control, never understanding why the world seemed stuck in place. Was it fair to leave them? Maria had asked herself that question 1,000 times. The answer was always the same. If they told everyone, the aliens would find out. The project would be discovered. Humanity would lose its only chance at freedom. The few had to sacrifice for the many. The many just would not know about it. She signed the form. In hidden bases around the solar system, red lights turned green. Officers who had waited years for this moment began giving orders. Engines that had never been used started to warm up. The Great Escape had begun. In Montana, a man named Tony Russo stood on a hill and watched the sunset. His wife and 2 children were already on one of the ships, sleeping in cold chambers that would keep them alive for the long journey. Tony had chosen to stay behind. Someone had to maintain the systems that would fool the aliens. Someone had to keep the lights on and the broadcasts running. Someone had to make sure that Earth looked normal for as long as possible. He had said goodbye to his family 3 days ago. His wife had cried. His children had not understood. They were too young. They would grow up in another galaxy, and they would never remember his face. Tony pulled out a small photo from his pocket. His family smiled at him from the picture. Happy, safe, free. "I love you," he whispered to the image. "Make a good life out there." The sun dropped below the horizon. Somewhere in space, the first ships were starting to move. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity was taking its first steps toward a new home. Tony watched until the first stars appeared. Then he walked back to his truck and drove toward the nearest maintenance station. He had work to do. He had promises to keep. The aliens watched Earth from their hidden stations. They recorded broadcasts and measured signals and wrote reports that would be sent to the council. Everything seemed normal. The humans were behaving exactly as expected. The Watchers had no idea that they were watching an empty stage. The real show was already over. The actors had left the theater. And by the time anyone noticed, it would be far too late. The departure happened on a quiet Tuesday in October. No alarms rang. No crowds gathered. No speeches were given. The greatest moment in human history happened in perfect silence. Deep in the outer reaches of the solar system, far beyond where the alien watchers could see, 342 ships began to move. They had been hiding in the darkness for months, powered down, invisible. Now their engines came alive with a soft blue glow. Admiral Grace Sullivan stood on the bridge of the lead ship, the New Hope. She was surrounded by officers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. The air felt electric. Everyone was afraid. Everyone was excited. Everyone understood that there was no going back. "All ships report ready," Commander Pete Walsh announced. His voice was steady, but Grace could see his hands trembling slightly. "The fleet is in formation." Grace looked at the main screen. It showed a view of space that few humans had ever seen. The sun was just a bright star among millions of others. Earth was invisible, too small and too far away to see. Home was already behind them. "Begin the countdown," Grace said. On 17 million ships, 17 million people slept in cold chambers. They had said goodbye to everything they knew. They had trusted their lives to machines and plans and the hope that somewhere out there, a new home was waiting. Among them was Sarah Walsh, Commander Pete's wife. She slept with a small photo clutched in her frozen fingers. A photo of the house they had left behind. The house where they had been married. The house where their children had taken their first steps. She would never see it again. The countdown reached 0. Space itself seemed to bend around the ships. The stars stretched into long lines of light. Reality twisted in ways that the Council did not know were possible. And then, in less than a heartbeat, the fleet was gone. The alien watchers noticed nothing. Their instruments showed the same empty space they had always shown. Their reports continued as normal. Humanity was still on Earth. Still on Mars, still exactly where they belonged. The deception machines did their job perfectly. On Earth, automated systems took over. Factories continued to run, making products for people who no longer existed. Power plants generated electricity for empty cities. Television stations broadcast shows to living rooms where no one was watching. In New York City, a robot that looked almost human walked down a busy street. It smiled at people. It bought coffee from a vendor. It sat on a park bench and read a newspaper. Anyone watching would think it was a normal person living a normal life. There were thousands of these robots across the planet. They drove cars. They shopped in stores. They had conversations with each other that sensors could pick up. They created the illusion of a living world. The aliens saw what they expected to see. A planet full of humans going about their daily business. Nothing unusual. Nothing worth reporting. Meanwhile, the real humans were already millions of miles away and moving faster every second. Tony Russo was one of the people left behind. There were about 10,000 of them scattered around the solar system. Volunteers who had chosen to stay. People who were too old to survive the journey. People who had decided that their job was here, keeping the lights on. Tony worked in a control center hidden beneath a mountain in Colorado. His job was to monitor the deception systems and make sure nothing went wrong. It was lonely work. Most of his coworkers were robots now. Every night, he walked outside and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there, his family was traveling to a new galaxy. Somewhere out there, his children were sleeping in frozen chambers, dreaming of nothing, getting closer to a world he would never see. He wondered if they would remember him. He hoped they would have good lives. He knew he would never find out. The fleet traveled for 3 weeks in odd time. But time worked differently when you moved faster than light. For the sleeping colonists, barely a moment passed. For the crew who stayed awake to guide the ships, it felt like years. Grace Sullivan did not sleep. She could not. Every hour brought new challenges. Strange readings from sensors. Small problems with engines. The stress of leading millions of people into the unknown. Pete Walsh found her on the observation deck one night, staring out at the strange lights of faster-than-light space. Nothing looked normal here. Stars did not exist. Time did not work properly. They were traveling through a space between spaces. "You should rest," Pete said. Grace shook her head. "I will rest when we arrive." "Not before. What do you think we will find?" Grace was quiet for a long moment. They had sent probes ahead years ago. The probes had found planets that could support human life. But probes could only tell you so much. "I think we will find a chance," she finally said. "That is all anyone can ask for. A chance to try. A chance to build. A chance to become whatever we want to become, without anyone watching over our shoulder. Yes, for the first time in history, humans will be truly alone. No one will tell us what we can and cannot do. No one will hold us back. We will succeed or fail on our own terms." Pete thought about his wife, sleeping somewhere in the ship below them. He thought about the children they had talked about having someday. Children who would be born under different stars. "I hope we deserve it," he said. "Deserve what?" "Freedom. I hope we are good enough to deserve it." Grace turned to look at him. Her eyes were tired but determined. "We will have to earn it. Every day. Every generation. Freedom is not something you deserve. It is something you build. Something you protect. Something you pass on to your children." She turned back to the window. "The aliens thought they could keep us small forever. They thought we would never grow beyond what they allowed. They forgot something important about humans. What is that?" Grace smiled slightly. "We do not like cages. We never have. Give us walls, and we will find a way through them. Give us limits, and we will break them. That is what makes us human." The strange lights of faster-than-light space swirled outside the window. The fleet continued on its impossible journey. Behind them, The Milky Way galaxy grew smaller and smaller until it was just another light in the darkness. Ahead of them, a new galaxy waited. New stars, new planets, new possibilities. Humanity was not running away. Humanity was running towards something. A future that belonged to them and no one else. The Council had made a mistake. They had watched humanity for 300 years, but they had never really understood what they were watching. They saw a young species, a dangerous species, a species that needed to be controlled. They never saw a species that simply refused to be controlled. A species that would rather travel 60 million light-years than accept a cage dot by the time they figured it out. It would be far too late. The fleet sailed on through the darkness between galaxies. 342 ships, 17 million dreamers, one impossible hope, and back on Earth, the robots kept the lights on, and the broadcast kept playing, and the aliens kept watching a planet that had already said goodbye. 50 years had passed since the humans first appeared on alien sensors. The Galactic Council had finally made a decision. Ambassador Cathvorn stood in the Great Hall on Nexus Prime, reading from a document that had taken decades to prepare. His glowing lines pulsed slowly, a sign of satisfaction. After all the debates and committees and arguments, the Council had agreed on a plan. "We will welcome humanity into the galactic community," Cathvorn announced. Under certain conditions. The conditions were many. Humans would be allowed to expand, but only to certain star systems. Humans would be given access to some technologies, but not others. Humans would have a seat on the Council, but their vote would count for less than older species thought it was not equality. It was not freedom. It was a leash, dressed up in pretty words. But to the Council, it seemed generous. They were giving the young species more than most newcomers received. The humans should be grateful. Cathvorn was chosen to deliver the good news. He was given a beautiful ship filled with gifts, samples of alien art and music, seeds from distant worlds, machines that could heal the sick and clean polluted air. "You will be the first ambassador to Earth," the Council told him. "You will bring peace between our species." Cathvorn felt proud. This was the most important mission of his life. He would be remembered in history books. He would be the one who finally brought humanity into the fold. His ship left Nexus Prime with great ceremony. Thousands of aliens gathered to watch it depart. Messages of congratulation flooded in from across the galaxy. The journey to Earth took 3 months. Cathvorn spent the time studying human culture. He learned their languages. He watched their broadcasts. He practiced what he would say when he met their leaders. He imagined their joy when they learned they were not alone. He imagined their gratitude when they received the Council's gifts. He imagined how history would remember this moment. He did not imagine what he actually found. The first sign that something was wrong came when his ship entered the solar system. The monitoring stations were silent. They should have been sending regular reports, but their signals had stopped months ago. Cathvorn tried to contact them. No response. He tried to contact Earth. No response. A cold feeling began to grow in his stomach. His ship approached Earth slowly, carefully. The blue planet looked exactly as it always had. Clouds swirled over continents. Lights glittered on the night side. Cities sprawled across the land. But something was wrong. Cathvorn could feel it. He sent messages to every human communication channel he could find. He announced himself as a peaceful ambassador. He asked for someone, anyone, to respond. Silence. His ship entered the atmosphere and descended toward a large city. The city was called New York. It was supposed to be one of the busiest places on Earth. The streets were empty. Cathvorn landed his ship in a large park. He stepped outside, surrounded by security guards and translation equipment, and all the tools of diplomacy. He found nothing but silence. The buildings stood tall and clean. The roads were smooth and maintained. Grass was trimmed. Windows were washed. Everything looked perfect, but there were no people. Kethvorin walked through empty streets. His guards spread out, searching for any sign of life. They found cars sitting in driveways. They found food in restaurants. They found television sets playing shows to empty rooms. But no humans. Not a single one. "This is impossible," Kethvorin whispered. His glowing lines pulsed with confusion and fear. Where did they go? His team searched for 3 days. They visited cities on every continent. They looked in small towns and remote farms. They explored bases on the moon and colonies on Mars. Everywhere they went, they found the same thing. The signs of recent life. The tools and buildings of civilization. And absolutely no people. On the 4th day, they found the letter. It was in a small house in a place called Iowa. A simple building with a simple yard. The kind of place where ordinary humans had lived ordinary lives. The letter sat on a kitchen table, held down by a small rock. It was written on actual paper in a human language that Kethvorin could read. "To whoever finds this," the letter began. Kethvorin read it slowly. Each word felt like a weight pressing down on him. "We knew you were watching. We knew you were afraid of what we might become. Maybe you were right to be afraid. Maybe we would have become everything you feared." His hands trembled as he continued reading. "But you never gave us the chance to prove otherwise. You decided our fate before we even knew you existed. You built invisible walls around us and thought we would never notice." The letter went on. It explained that humans had discovered the surveillance. They had found out about the interference in their scientific research. They had understood that the Council saw them as a threat to be contained. So we decided to choose our own fate instead. Don't bother looking for us. By the time you read this, we will be further away than you can imagine. Kethvorin felt sick. His entire mission, everything he had prepared for, was meaningless. The humans he had come to welcome were gone. The universe is larger than your council. There is room enough for everyone. We are going to find our own room. The letter ended with a single word: goodbye. Kethvorin stood in that empty kitchen for a very long time. He held the letter in his hands and tried to understand what had happened. The humans had not attacked. They had not declared war. They had not done any of the things the Council had feared. They had simply left. Somehow, without anyone noticing, an entire species had packed up their civilization and walked away. They had vanished so completely that even the Watchers had been fooled. Kethvorin sent his report to the Council. He expected anger. He expected blame. He expected calls for action. What he got was panic. Search parties were sent to every corner of the galaxy. Every known method of tracking was used. The greatest scientists of 400 species tried to figure out where the humans had gone. They found nothing. No trail. No signals. No signs. It was as if humanity had never existed. Kethvorin returned to Nexus Prime a broken ambassador. He had been sent to bring humanity into the galactic community. Instead, he had discovered that humanity had rejected the galaxy entirely. The Council debated for years about what to do. Some wanted to keep searching. Others wanted to prepare for war, expecting the humans to return with revenge in their hearts. But most just waited, watched, wondered. Where had the humans gone? What were they doing? Would they ever come back? No one knew. And that was the most frightening thing of all. In the empty house in Iowa, the letter still sat on the kitchen table. The rock still held it in place. The words still waited for whoever might read them next. But no one ever came. And the house sat empty under silent skies. Humanity was gone. And the galaxy would never be the same. 500 years had passed since the humans vanished. The Galactic Council still existed, but it was not the same. Fear had changed it. The memory of the species that simply walked away had haunted them for generations. Kethvorn was long dead, but his descendants still served as ambassadors. They still told the story of the empty planet. They still wondered where humanity had gone. Some believed the humans had destroyed themselves. The void between galaxies was cruel and endless. No species had ever crossed it. Surely the humans had died somewhere in that darkness. Others believed they had evolved into something else. Beings of pure energy or thought. Creatures that no longer needed bodies or planets. Few believed they were still out there, watching, waiting, growing, into something the galaxy could not imagine. This last group was, 60 million light years away. In a galaxy that the Council had never seen, humanity had not just survived. It had thrived. The Exodus fleet had found a galaxy rich with possibilities. Thousands of star systems. Hundreds of planets that could support life. Room enough for billions of humans and billions more after them. The first years had been hard. The colonists had to build everything from nothing. They had to farm alien soil and breathe recycled air and work harder than any generation before them. Many had died. The journey itself had killed thousands. The early colonies had failed again and again before they learned how to survive. But humans were good at surviving. It was what they did best. The first planet they settled was called New Dawn, a world of blue oceans and green continents, much like the Earth they had left behind. Within 100 years, it had cities and farms and all the marks of civilization. Then came other worlds. New Hope, Second Chance, Horizon. Each one became home to millions of humans, building new lives under new stars. Admiral Grace Sullivan did not live to see the promised land. She died 3 years before the fleet arrived, her body worn out from the stress of leadership. But she died knowing that her mission would succeed. Her last words were recorded for history. "We made it," she whispered. "Tell them we made it." Commander Pete Walsh lived for 30 more years after the landing. He helped build the first cities on New Dawn. He raised children with his wife, Sarah. He told stories about Earth to grandchildren who would never see it. When Pete died, he was buried under a tree that had grown from seeds brought from Earth, a piece of home in a new galaxy. Now, 500 years later, humanity numbered in the tens of billions. They had spread across hundreds of star systems. They had built things that would have amazed their ancestors. Great cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. Stations that orbited neutron stars, harvesting energy that the Council did not know how to use. Ships that could cross the galaxy in hours, and they had never stopped learning. Without the invisible hand of the Council holding them back, human science had exploded. They had mastered technologies that the Council thought impossible. They had asked questions that no one else had ever asked. They had become everything the Council had feared. And more. On New Dawn, in a park in the capital city, a woman named Beth Cooper sat on a bench with her grandson. The boy was 7 years old with bright eyes and endless questions. His name was Sam, and he wanted to know everything. "Grandmother," Sam said, looking up at the unfamiliar stars, "why did we leave the old galaxy?" Beth smiled. It was a question every child asked eventually. A question that every adult had to answer. "Because they wanted to decide who we would become," she said. "And we decided that was our choice to make. Were they bad? The aliens?" Beth thought about this carefully. She had studied the history. She knew the full story. "I do not think they were bad," she finally said. "I think they were afraid. Fear makes people do strange things. It makes them try to control things they do not understand. Are we going to go back someday?" Beth looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, unimaginably far away, was the galaxy where humanity had been born. The little blue planet where her ancestors had taken their first steps. the place they had been forced to leave. "Maybe someday," she said, "when we are ready. When they are ready. When the universe has had enough time to get used to what we have become." Sam nodded. He did not fully understand, but he accepted the answer. Children were good at that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. The night sky of New Dawn was different from Earth's sky. Different patterns. Different colors. A different moon rising over the horizon, but it was still beautiful. It was still home. In the old galaxy, the Council continued its watch over the empty Earth. They had never stopped hoping that the humans would return. They had never stopped fearing what would happen if they did. Cathforin's great-great-granddaughter now sat in his seat at the Council. Her name was Vethkari, and she had spent her whole life studying the humans who were no longer there. She had read every record, studied every artifact, watched every piece of human media that the deception machines had broadcast over the centuries, and she had reached a conclusion that troubled her deeply. "We made a mistake," she told the Council. "Not in being afraid of them. In thinking that fear gave us the right to control them." The other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably. This was not a popular opinion. They were just a young species, one argued. They needed guidance. But did they? Vethkari asked. Or did they just need to be left alone? To find their own path? To make their own mistakes? She held up a copy of the letter that had been found in Iowa. The original was in a museum now, preserved forever. They did not leave because they hated us. They left because they could not be free with us watching. They needed space that we were not willing to give. And if they return? Another ambassador asked. After 500 years of growing without limits. What then? Vethkari did not have an answer. No one did. But somewhere across the endless void between galaxies, the answer was being written every day. In the cities and farms and laboratories of humanity's new home. In the children being born under alien suns. In the dreams of a species that had refused to be caged. Humanity had not run away from its problems. It had run toward its possibilities. And someday, when the time was right, they would return. Not as the young species the Council had once feared, but as something new. Something the universe had never seen before. Sam grew up to be a pilot. He flew ships between stars and explored worlds that no human had ever seen. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he would look toward the distant smudge of light that was the Milky Way. Galaxy. He would think about the ancestors who had given up everything so that he could be free. The grandparents who had slept frozen in ships crossing the void. The people who had stayed behind to keep the lights on. He would think about Earth, the home he had never known, and wonder what it looked like now. And then he would turn his ship toward the horizon, toward new stars and new adventures, and he would smile. This was what his ancestors had wanted. This was why they had made the journey. This was why they had left everything behind. So that someday, a boy named Sam could look at the stars and know that any of them could be home. The Council had spoken too late. Humanity had already vanished, and somewhere in the endless light of a new galaxy, they were only just beginning.